And good evening, everybody. Welcome to the latest edition of the African American Athlete live stream. I'm Rick Hampton with my friend and frat brother, Michael Roberson, coming to you on a Wednesday evening. Hope everybody's doing well. We got over the hump today, headed towards the weekend, headed to the first round of the NCAA basketball tournaments. Hey, Mike, did you have any kind of traditions when you're not covering stuff of watching the games?
Well, that's the weird thing about it is that a couple things are not going to happen this year as I've been doing the last few years. So I'm not going to the Final Four for the women this year, which is in Tampa. And then, of course, it's a different tradition because usually Stanford women were there with Tara. But Tara retired last year. And then one of our star players went down to USC to join up with Juju. So, so yeah, the women's team, not NCAA or the men's, but I did cover the NIT yesterday because the men made it to the NIT because of that heart-wrenching loss in the ACC conference tournament. I don't know if you saw it, but Stanford had Louisville beat, and then they let off the gas. Then it came down to a tie game. Louisville throws up some kind of shot. Akpara, one of the Stanford players, had the rebound, but it was a lot of stuff going on. It looked like he was trying to pass it out. It inadvertently went to the Louisville player. He throws it up with no time left.
What?
That's how they want. Yeah, that's how they get eliminated. And so now they had to drop themselves down to the NIT, which they're number 2 ranked, which means they host games here at Maple. So that's where I was last night. The women are in some other tournament. It's called the WBIT or something like that.
Is that
I
like
don't
the
want to sound like I said a
CBI?
bad word, yeah, but it's something like that. And then they'll get off. They'll start playing Thursday. So I got local stuff going on, but it's not the traditional NCAA what it used to be because it used to be Stanford hosting the first 2 rounds of the NCAA.
But what about when you were coming up as a kid, teenager, young man? Did
Yeah,
you?
well, I mean, you know what? And it's funny you say that because, I looked at it. I think once I started, covering sports professionally, I don't have the same thing because I go back to, I remember when I really was cognizant of what was going on. I definitely remember when Marquette won in '77 when they beat North Carolina. Al McGuire was done after that. That was a big deal because that was local. It's a Milwaukee team.
Yeah.
So I get people coming to me and say, "Man, Marquette is in New York." I was like, "Oh my!" I've had so many idiots just coming to me just trying to just argue me down. I said, "Dude, it's Wisconsin Avenue, downtown Milwaukee. I know. I drive by it all the time." But then '78, I remember Goose Givens with Kentucky.
Kentucky, the left-hander.
Right. I remember that vividly. He had like 40-something points. Then '79, of course, still the most watched one ever. Magic and Bird and that championship. So those 3 were like my introduction. I was like really vividly watching. Then we get to the '80s. 1980, I was excited. UCLA played, but I think Larry Brown was coaching them then. They got in trouble. They lost anyway, but I think they lost to Louisville. Then 81, 82. So I was really into it in the 80s, of course, because the Big East was big. Then, of course, when Georgetown finally won, Houston, Phi Slam and Jamma, all of them. So 80s, I was really into it. I would say right after that Michigan won in '89, because I was still down at Tennessee State. And I remember I had guys getting mad at me because I said I got Michigan winning. They said, "Oh man, no." I said, "You should be going for the Badgers." I said, "Yeah." I said, "You could say that, but." And then I had my Illinois people mad because remember Illinois is in the Final Four that year. It was Illinois, Michigan, Seton Hall, and I believe Duke. So when Michigan won that championship, of course, all the Michigan guys were all going crazy. So that was probably when the last time I was really into it. Then we got to the 90s. I'm out of school now. I didn't care as much. I mean, the Fab Five were cool because they went to 2 in a row. But then that's when that Duke stuff happened back to back. So I started to lose a little interest maybe early 90s. So I wasn't as into it as I used to be. Then of course you start doing one and dones and all
But
that
you didn't, okay, I'm going to this sports bar, we're gonna watch games all day, and you never did that.
I never really did that because things like that. Sometimes I get upset because you get people that's just in there just for the frivolity of it. They're not there really to watch it. It's like you got all kind of ancillary stuff going on. I'm like, come on, man, these guys aren't even paying attention, or they're talking about some other conversations. So, and then like I said, college basketball just seemed to lose it once they start doing the one and done. And like I said, they just you can't really get used to a player. You be like, okay, wait a minute. I remember I used to see Len Bias year after year at Maryland, Michael at North Carolina. It started to change, and then now I'm doing it in a different realm. Now I'm doing it as sportscaster because back then in the early 90s, after I moved back from Pennsylvania, because I didn't really have a team that I covered when I was in Pennsylvania because they had schools like Gannon and all that. They didn't have real big time college game teams. But when I came back to Wisconsin, I was covering Marquette, and then that was during a pretty good time at Marquette. And so then I started looking at college basketball a lot differently. It wasn't that oh man, I can't wait to watch this national championship game. I remember '81, how crazy that one was. Remember, that's the day Reagan got shot. And
yeah,
that game
was talking about should they play the game
exactly. And I remember I was going for Indiana, which was once again growing up in the Midwest. You can't stand Indiana and Notre Dame. Okay, that's just especially as a brother. But Isaiah Thomas was on this team, and they were playing against North Carolina, led by Al Wood, not James Worthy, but Al Wood. And I'll never forget at school that day. I was in the library. I was in junior high at the time. I was in the library, and I was looking for some reason. I was looking at a book on assassinations. Crazy. So then when I'm about to go to basketball practice after school, they made the announcement over this loudspeaker that, there was an incident in Washington, D.C. where Ronald Reagan was shot. And I was like, whoa. And then I had people cheering, even though I didn't care for him, but I wouldn't cheer for somebody getting shot. And I just said, man, our whole world might be altered now because this might go back to the Kennedy situation. Kennedy was right before I was born.
What was that? That was 80?
This was 81. Because remember, he doesn't get inaugurated until 81. You win in 80, then you got to wait till the following year. So this is 81. I remember it was during basketball season. And I remember I said, I got to watch Zeke do his thing in the national championship game. I said, well, now it might be canceled. We might be at war. I mean, or our country might be in chaos. Because remember, at that time, people started to really figure out what was the chain of command. Because Alexander Haig thought he was going to be in charge. What was he?
Did they delay the game?
Was that?
I can't remember. Did they delay it?
No, they played the game. Like I said, I
played it that night. Yeah.
Philadelphia. And Zeke did his thing, and they won it. But it was people saying, I don't know if they should have played this game. This game kind of was tainted, because they said, remember when they played football after Kennedy? So you kept getting revisited back to 1963, but this was 81 when this happened.
Yeah.
So.
Well, anyway.
Yeah.
Hey, man, we got our guests on the line.
Oh, he's on the But that's when I started. I would say the 90s is when I stopped really paying attention to the NCAA.
Hey, we're in good hands now because our great friend J.D. Harris is in the house, the author of Tomlin, the Soul of a Football Coach. And you know what? I get stuff. It's amazing. Throughout the year, I'll get little, the TikTok stuff. All these coaches watching Tomlin, man, how he connects with a team. It doesn't have to be football season. I get them all the freaking time, and as our friend and a good friend of the show, former vice president of the Lions, Larry Lee says, man, he is the ultimate football coach. But we're gonna get to Tomlin and football, and JD has a new project coming out. We're gonna talk about too. But how you doing, good brother?
I'm great. How you gentlemen doing?
All right.
We're
You gotta
doing
call him
good,
D9
man.
brother, not good brother. D9 brother.
I'm trying to get my bracket
Okay.
together, man.
How my
That's
D9
right.
brothers doing? There you go.
Right.
I want to get my bracket together, so I'm gonna get some insight from you tonight, JD. We were just talking, just chatting a little bit about the history of the tournament and how it's evolved and how different the game is now, JD, with the portal and the NIL money, the one and done. It's kind of amazing what's happened in college sport. And Mike had just covered Stanford last night, and he was talking about, it was the ACC tournament. I'm like, wait a minute,
No,
what?
it was NIT last night.
Yeah, but they should have been in. They were
Yeah.
in the ACC tournament.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's all that they played. Did they play Cal in the? I was like, why are these two West Coast teams playing in the ACC tournament? I had to laugh.
Nuts, man.
Yeah. It's funny you said it. Yeah, in the ACC tournament they did beat Cal, but then that Louisville game was the disaster because Louisville had blown them out in the regular season, and then now you got a 15-point lead in the ACC tournament, which is really your only route to make it to the NCAA big dance, and then they lost on a fluke. Yeah. So.
Yeah. But JD, just your thoughts overall on where we are in college athletics today.
I mean, it's one of the reasons why I really have a lot of respect for Kelvin Sampson. And I know he's kind of brought in a couple of transfers, but for the most part, he still coaches the way they did. I mean, they don't have like the superstar players at Houston, but they have guys that have been in the program for years. And that's one of the things that happens. Sometimes these teams that don't have the superstars, but they have the veterans, they're tournament tested, they may be able to beat a team with the one and dones because of the experience that they have. Houston, that could be the case with Houston this year, but he'll bring in a player now and then, but he believes in program building. There aren't many coaches like that anymore. Florida, I think their whole backcourt is transfers from last year. So there's different ways to do it, but I still like the old-fashioned way. You just don't see it that much anymore.
Yeah, and it's hard to do because, like I was just saying to Ricky earlier, you used to have it, you at least thought you were going to see these guys at least 3 years because that's kind of how the mandate was. And, Michael leaving after 3 years, I think Worthy left after 3 years. So you can get used to those guys. And you can have like an affinity for, man, remember that 4-year run with Pat Ewing? Yeah. You know how popular Georgetown was at that moment?
Yeah.
I mean, people thought Georgetown was a black college back then. You had John Thompson, you had all these brothers on the team, and Ewing and Michael Graham, a friend of the show. So that was a whole different time, and we knew we were going to see Pat for a while. And people forget, before Michael hit that infamous shot, Pat Ewing was the preeminent freshman that year. They was doing documentaries on Pat Ewing and everything, but he was the rookie that everybody was looking at. But Michael just stole the show in that championship when he hit that jumper, and it changed his life forever.
Well, think about Georgetown could have easily won 3 straight championships. They lost to North Carolina.
Yep.
And then they lost to Villanova, which played the perfect game. So they easily could have won three straight championships very easily. And it kind of gets forgotten how dominant they were back then.
And Mike said it. I'm sorry, Mike.
I'm saying that the 83 year is the one that kind of baffled me because they seem to just not even do much that year. But 84 is when they finally won it. And then 85 was the Villanova game. But that 83 season, I can't really remember what happened to them, but that's the year Valvano just went on that excellent run by saying, we're going to foul everybody. We're going to just play a gritty game, and they end up winning it all against another team that underachieved during that time. We just talked about Houston, but back 40-something years ago, Houston was like a high-flying team, but they never won. Back-to-back years, they found a way to lose.
I tell all the YouTube fanatics, the young bloods of today, go back and check out Clyde Drexler's dunk against Louisville.
Yeah.
It was unbelievable. In the semifinals, they blew out Louisville.
Yeah.
That was one of the most incredible. I remember when it happened, I jumped because I can't really tell because he had it in both hands. He switched hands and then dunked it.
Yeah.
Tell them to go back and check that one. All the dunks they see today, go back and check on that one. That was unbelievable.
Also, when he against Memphis State, when he jumped over Andre Turner. Just
jumped over him.
Right.
Just jumped over him.
When they talk about nonsense about all these athletes are better now, it's like, how good these guys were back then, Clyde Drexler and all those guys, and then Spud Webb and NC State.
The non-athletic 80. Wait. And we're gonna get to this what we can. But Dominique Wilkins, man, are you freaking kidding me?
I know. Yeah.
Daryl Dawkins, a high schooler.
Oh yeah.
Probably one of the original high schoolers. I think he might have been the first high schooler in NBA history. I know most of them went the route ABA, but I think Daryl Dawkins is considered the first high school player to play in the NBA directly.
Man, shattered a lot of backboards.
My freshman year at Virginia Union, Doc was still with the Squires, and the Squires, they played in Hampton, they played in Norfolk. I mean, they probably played in some little high school gyms. I mean, the league was, but they would come to Richmond and the Coliseum, and JD, you could get tickets for $5.
He was jumping higher then than he did with the Sixers, right? Yeah. He was jumping higher than he did with the Sixers.
Yeah,
his legs were younger then.
Of course, getting that $5 back then, that was
a lot of money.
I'm like, bro, let me get a couple of bucks from you, man. I'll give it back to you. But, I mean, this guy, he had that big fro. He come down there just lying, just incredible, man. Don't tell me these guys weren't athletes. But, JD, one of the things I want to ask you, getting to today's game, and actually kind of looking back and what you've been doing and your people with Tendex over the years, and I want you to explain it to the audience what the Tendex principles are. How has three-point shooting changed the game, or has it?
As far as Tendex is concerned, it doesn't really impact it at all, because all Tendex does is it takes all of your numbers. I mean, whether they're 3-point numbers or 2-point or free throws, it compiles your points. It's very simple, basic system. The complication comes when you have to factor in each team has its own game pace, which is why people don't really know how to do it. You can pretty much do the basic Tendex formula, but you'll have the wrong ratings. But then you have to factor in that particular team and all their opponents. You come up with a game pace. Then you apply that game pace to each individual player. Some teams have higher game paces. Some teams, play at a faster pace. Some teams have low. So the 3-point, it's impacted the game, but as far as Tendex, it's amazing to me. It's the same now as when I was covering the NBA, 25, 30 years ago. It's still the same thing. It still identifies players in a way that I don't think any other system, and I don't really do it as much anymore. I like to do it during the tournament. It gives me a good idea of what to expect. And there's always a couple of sleeper teams in the tournament that people don't necessarily recognize. This year has a lot of sleeper players that people should really want to look out for. Some great individual talent.
The difference between analytics and Tendex, how would you differ?
They break it down into more individual categories. How many shots you get off. Tendex just does it's the only system I know of that you can identify players. What Tendex does, other systems don't do. They don't compare positions. They compare ratings. So you can compare with Tendex, you can compare a center to a guard because each position has its own average. And the player's rating is combined by his number, and then you compute that with the average rating for that position. So as opposed to saying, well, you can't compare a center and a forward, with Tendex you can. It's a basic 3-digit number.
You mean you compare their value to the?
Yeah, you just the value. So, like a guard may have a 500 rating, and a center may have a 600 rating, but because the guard position, the rating is lower, because guards tend to shoot farther out. They're shooting more threes. They're shooting more jump shots. Where centers closer to the basket. Well, I guess they used to be, right? Now they're all shooting threes. So I might have to alter that Tendex a little because now you got big guys shooting threes, but they get more rebounds. You see what I'm saying? So I like it because that way I can compare players, different positions, and then when you compare players from smaller schools to bigger schools, you factor in the strength of schedule, quoting. So a guy from a small school may have a really sky-high rating. You factor in the strength of schedule, maybe knocks his rating down a little bit. So I'm still like a kid in a candy shop. What I've been doing them all week, just doing the ratings, and because I haven't been sitting at the TV watching games all year. So some of these guys, I've never even heard of before.
Same
and their ratings, some of their ratings are amazing. Yeah.
So that's what I was going to ask you. Who's like off the charts? Who would you say would be off the charts, or it could be historical player or somebody right now? Who would be somebody that would be right at the top of the charts because they're just so amazing?
Well, right now, I mean, everybody looks at the guy at Duke, Cooper Flagg. He has a very, very high rating for a freshman, but there's a guy at Colorado State who I hadn't even seen play named Nick Clifford, who has the highest rating, Tendex rating of players in the tournament. That doesn't mean he's necessarily a better player than Cooper Flagg, but he might be. His rating is off the charts. He's like a 6'8", 6'9" guy. He can shoot the three. He rebounds. Look at some highlights of him. He's spectacular. Colorado State is one of those sleeper teams. So he would be the one guy. Cooper Flagg who everybody knows at Duke, has the highest rating amongst, I guess, major college players. Right. Colorado State, I would say Nick Clifford, very good. Braden Smith, a point guard at Purdue, has a really high rating. PJ Haggerty at Memphis has a very high rating. There's just so many.
How about this obscure one? Maxime Renaud.
Where's he playing?
Stanford.
I had to do Stanford since they didn't make it. I've kind of focused on. Now I'll do it at the end of the year. I focus on.
But no, the reason why I say that because he like led the country in double doubles.
Oh, did he? Okay, he probably has a high rating. The thing I like about Tendex is you can look at a stat line.
Yeah.
On a player, and I could pretty much tell that he's going to have a high rating or a low rating. You look at shooting percentage, and one of the keys that Dave Herron, the originator, taught me was that if a player has more steals than turnovers, almost always is a good player. Don't ask me why, because people use the assist turnover ratio, but he said the player has more or close to. If you have as many steals as you have turnovers, because Tendex is also based on possessions.
Yeah.
When you steal the ball, you're creating more possessions for your team,
Absolutely.
right? Like a rebound. So those are some of the keys. High shooting percentage. And if this guy, if he passes, he gets assists, he gets steals, he doesn't turn the ball over a lot, generally means he's going to be a pretty good player. And most of the great players they have.
Well, but the reason why I say that because Maxime just this last game, which was an NIT game, 22 points, 11 rebounds, 5 blocks.
Yeah.
So
any player that does that's versatile, that has a lot of stats, stuff the stat sheet. Unless they're just taking a ton of shots and they're shooting a very low percentage,
right? They're
going to have high rating. Then you have to factor in he might be a guy might be a 6'5" power forward in college. which that won't translate to the next level.
Right.
Then the question would be, okay, can he play guard? Then you look at his shooting, look at his 3-point percentage and see, okay, can he make the change? Can he make the switch from power forward to guard, to shooting guard in the NBA? Because there's a lot of really good college players that are playing out of position. And sometimes they don't make it to the next level because they can't play that position at the NBA level.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hey, it's so funny you mentioned Colorado State, man. They are in a very interesting spot. They're in that 5-12 spot where they will play Memphis and Haggerty.
That's going to be a great matchup. Look for the Haggerty Clifford matchup. That's going to be a phenomenal matchup.
And something else you said, John, I never thought about, and now that you mentioned it, it makes sense. Steals to, if you got as many steals as you do turnovers, that's a highly effective player.
That's why Chris Paul's so good.
Yeah, people don't look at that though. They look at, it's the traditional, the typical AP story through the years is Joe Smith scored 15 points and grabbed 10 rebounds. Right. And people base that off of, but he might have gotten outplayed by a guy that had 10 points, 7 assists, 4 rebounds, 6 steals. But that person's not going to get mentioned in the league. The guy who had the most points is going to get acknowledged as the top player. So Tendex doesn't look at it factors in points and rebounds, but if you do a lot of good things, a lot of positive things for your team, you're going to tend to be generally going to be a pretty good player. And if your position, if your height, if you have the physical attributes of a power forward, of a small forward, of a 2 guard, and you're playing against good competition, you're going to have at least a chance probably to play the next level. The one problem still with college sports in general is that we don't see a Nick Clifford, right? We've seen Cooper Flagg 100 times this year, and he's a really good player. Yeah. That's why they're always amazed at the tournament because they see these guys. There's a Donovan Dent in New Mexico who has a really high rating. I've never seen him play. Right. I'm sure they were probably on TV a couple of times. So America will see that guy. Wisconsin transfer, John, I think it's Tanjay.
Tanjay,
phenomenal rating. And McNeese State, Shahada Wells, another phenomenal rating. Bennett Sturts at Drake. There's just a lot of really good players that, you heard about Johanny Broom at Auburn. He's really good. But there are a lot of other really good players that
what
we
about
don't
Queen
really know
at Maryland?
about.
Queen at
What's
Maryland.
That?
Queen at Maryland?
Yeah, he has a very high rating. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, he's up there. Yeah, he has a lottery rating. It's like, what is it? I think it's like 282. He's 282 over the average for a forward position, which is, if you're at 200, generally that's assumed a lottery talent. Okay. So he's well over that. Okay. They have a good team. I mean, they could make a nice run.
Yeah.
They could make a nice run.
Yeah, I'm looking at, you got Auburn and Duke are number 1 seeds.
Or Tendex. I'll tell you, Tendex. Here's how Tendex has done its top 10 teams. This is just strictly off of their team ratings. Duke's number 1, Auburn number 2, Gonzaga number 3, Florida number 4, Tennessee 5, Houston 6, Maryland 7, Texas Tech 8, Michigan State 9, UConn 10. This is just strictly Tendex. This is, and really the only team that's really kind of out of the rating is Gonzaga. Gonzaga's a number 8 seed,
right? But
they have the rating of a number 1 seed. So we'll see what they do. But they have a tough matchup. If they win, they're going to probably play Houston, and that's going to be. I'm sorry.
They factor in any injuries because remember Cooper got hurt during the ACC tournament.
Yeah, this is strictly. I mean, this is their stats going into the tournament.
Okay.
Now if he can't play, well, no, they're out of it. So yeah, that's definitely the message. He's got to play. He's got to play at full strength.
Right.
I really like Houston. And when you were talking about them earlier, about their balance, I mean, that was one of the things I like about them and their toughness. And now I'm looking at them. They are 1 seed. And They opened up with SIUE, whoever that is. I don't even know who that is.
That's Southern Illinois University, Edwardsville.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, if they can sneak by them, they'll get the Georgia Gonzaga winner.
That's going to be a tough game there. That's going to be a tough game either.
SEC sent about 10 teams this year. And Georgia, man, very athletic team. Yeah. But Houston, man, is solid, and they are mentally tough. In fact, I definitely have them get into the Final Four. JD got me a little scared now with this Gonzaga backed up. But I think I'll
that's just their rating. I mean, but they really haven't played a team as physical and maniacal on defense as Houston is. I mean, Houston. I mean, they're an offensive team, but Houston's going to get in their job and make them work. And the way they pound the offensive boards, they don't have any players that have really high ratings. What they do have is a team of 7 or 8 players that they all have pretty good ratings. They're very solid. They're very balanced. They get way more turnovers than their opponents, and they have 2 or 3 players that have more steals and then turnovers. A couple of guys, they have more blocks than turnovers. So that takes you to another level of excellence on that end. So they lost their point guard who went to the NBA. They didn't lose a step. They maybe dropped a point, which is remarkable when you think about how good he was. Mm-hmm. But he keeps that team concept going. They got a transfer from Oklahoma. He's kind of replaced the young man who went to the NBA. His rating's not quite as high.
You're talking about Sasser? He's here in Detroit.
No, he's the point guard. He's at Carolina. He's with Charlotte. He got hurt against Duke. He got hurt against Duke in the tournament last year. The point guard. He was tremendous. Okay. I don't know why his name slipped me, but I think he was a first or second round pick. He was the heart and soul of the team, and a lot of programs would have fallen off, and they didn't. They lost 1, 2 league games. I mean, they've gone into the Big 12 and just totally dominated it for 2 years. They've kind of pushed Kansas to the side. You know, Kansas was the program there. You don't really hear as much about Kansas the last couple of years. They really have taken charge, and he just grinds them. He grinds them, and you worry that that they're going to get burnt out the way they play. But they have that energy. They dive on the floor for loose balls. They're mean. They're nasty. They play like Georgetown. They just don't have a Ewing in the middle, but they play with that kind of intensity, the way Georgetown played.
I do want to mention the women's bracket before we move on, because JD, I definitely got some couple of NBA questions I want to ask you. In the last couple of years, guys, the ladies' tournament has outpaced the men's tournament in terms of being interesting. I think a lot of that had to do with all the issues with.
And I was right in the middle of it all 3 years.
With Caitlin Clark and everything. But there was some excellent basketball being played. And let me get my brackets out here.
I just did the women today, and it's incredibly competitive at the top. I don't think last year was that. I mean, last year you had South Carolina, you had Iowa, you had UConn. I think it was North Carolina State. This year, UConn, USC, UCLA, South Carolina, Texas. I mean, there really isn't a lot to choose from. It's very at the top. It's very, very balanced. Pendex actually has UConn with the best overall rating by a mile. Yeah. USC, UCLA, South Carolina, Texas, TCU, LSU, Oklahoma, Notre Dame, Duke, top 10. And these are just strictly team ratings going into the tournament.
Hey, I don't know if we got a chance to do Tendex last year, but did Caitlin Clark jump off the page?
Oh my, yeah. Her rating was it was astronomical.
What about Juju as a freshman?
She was right behind him.
Okay.
She was right behind him. It was just Caitlin Clark's rating was just so high. Any other year, Juju would have been. This year, I've got Juju number 2. Amazingly, there's a freshman at UConn named Sarah Strong, who I've never seen play. Who has the highest overall rating. It doesn't mean she's a better player.
Right.
It means she has a higher rating than Juju. Juju's second. Then Anissa Morrow from LSU, third. Page from UConn is fourth. So Danya Prince, TCU, fifth.
What about a freshman over at Vanderbilt? It's a freshman at Vanderbilt. Her brother plays for Stanford. Blake.
Michaela Blakes.
Yeah.
Michaela, she's number 8 on the list overall. Wow. Yeah.
It's amazing how consistent that thing is, man.
Exactly.
I mean, he calls it out.
That's the thing about Tindex. It identifies the best players, but it also identifies really great players that people don't know. The great players, you'll always see the great players at the top. It identifies them. It doesn't miss on them. But also it'll bring some players up that people say, well, how did that person get up there? And it's just going strictly by the numbers. And it hasn't changed in 30 years. It's the same. It's the same thing. It's amazing. Yeah.
That is truly amazing. Now, you hadn't gotten to the NBA yet, have you?
I won't get to that until the playoffs. Yeah. But I'll tell you, last year, it's interesting. I did a couple things for Substack. And going into the finals, I predicted, everybody was saying, because remember Dallas had won, and some people said Dallas could win, and the Boston had a huge their rating was just astronomical, and I said they were going to crush Dallas. Tindex said it. I didn't say it, but some people thought Dallas could win. Dude, Tindex, I felt confident to write that they were going to beat them. You don't know whether they're going to sweep them or not, but they destroyed them, and their rating said they were going to destroy them. It wasn't even close. So, Tindex doesn't get caught up in emotion, who your favorite, because a lot of times, I like Houston. Houston is my favorite team. If I'm picking them, I say Houston's going to win. Tindex says something else. So when you're doing the system, you kind of learn. I know Dave Herron, the originator, he told me one of the drafts, I think it was the draft with Kevin Durant and the center, Odin. And he picked Odin as the number 1 player. But Tindex had rated Kevin Durant with a much higher rating. But he liked Odin. And he said that taught him. He never did it again. Because it turns out Kevin Durant was a superior player. And he was number 2 on the list. He actually was number 1 according to Tindex. So it takes a while. I'm not getting into debates and arguments with people. How are you going to say that? And I'll ask them, okay, what are you basing your opinion on? Well, he scores a lot or he likes him. I said, okay, I'm basing it off of that, but I'm presenting facts. Then they get mad. No, you don't know what you're talking about. I said, I'm just telling you what Tindex is telling you. I'm not putting my personal opinion in it. I'm just telling you, I've studied the numbers. This is what the numbers say. It could be wrong. Right. It's not perfect, but NBA scouts aren't perfect. They miss all the time.
What I'm saying is that, but the Tindex also factor in that he absolutely was horribly injured, and that there's no way he could realize his number 1 potential.
Oh yeah. If you're scouting, we've tried for years to get scouts to really use it. Some do, some don't. Mm-hmm. You factor Tindex. Tindex is just if you're a scout, Tindex is just one thing that you use. You're going to do a lot of other things too. You're going to factor in injuries. You're going to factor in that. You don't just. But if you look at Tindex will give you. Now you take everything else. Size. Maybe he's not big enough. Maybe he's not quick enough. Maybe he had injuries, and you factor all that in. But Tindex kind of just gives you that extra something else that you can look at and maybe help you make a decision.
But Tindex, but you got to think about Tindex was looking at them coming out of Ohio State and Texas. Yeah. With it for the draft, mm-hmm. So it still shows the consistency. Go ahead.
The reason why I say this is because when you look at it, you got an ambidextrous 7-footer. This is when they still had centers playing ball back then. Mm-hmm. And then you had a skinny scorer that we saw the year before, Michael Beasley. Beasley was explosive like Kevin Durant was.
Now, he had a high rating. No, he had a high Tindex rating, but Tindex doesn't factor in all the other.
Yeah, exactly.
But as far as just on the skill rating, he had a very high Tindex rating. But again, if you're a scout, you got to take that and weigh it against everything else when you're making a decision. But he had the dude was a phenomenal talent. Exactly. I mean, Beasley was just incredibly talented. Right. It's as talented as anybody in the league today. He just had a whole lot of stuff going on.
Right. But see, that's why I get upset when people say, "Man, Portland was stupid against Sam Bowie," or "Portland was stupid again to get Greg Oden." I'm like, you got to ask yourself, what did they need? And then nobody knew Durant was going to explode like this. And then, like I said, you got to be logical. Like, okay, now you would never draft a Greg Oden now because of the way they play basketball. Because like he'll be a dinosaur like the Stifle Tower, where they can expose him during the playoffs. You know how everybody loves the Stifle Tower until they isolate him and make him a non-factor. Whereas now, yeah, absolutely, you'll pick Kevin Durant because he can shoot the three, he can do all that. But back then, I think that was probably the last of the postman actually doing something.
Well, that's that you mentioned Sam Bowie, because Dave Herron, the originator of Tendex, that was the first year he did the draft. This was Tendex. This was Tendex's draft.
Okay.
Hakeem Olajuwon, Michael Jordan, Charles Barkley, John Stockton. That was the Tendex top four.
Okay.
Now, what was the Tendex? What was the top four?
Top four was
who was it?
Olajuwon, Jordan,
Bowie,
and Barkley.
And now Jordan and Sam Perkins. I think it was Sam Perkins.
That's right, Sam Perkins. Sam Perkins. Then Barkley.
But look at the four. Look at the.
That's pretty good.
Yeah.
The four the Tendex pick. You picked four. You picked Olajuwon had the top rating. Then was followed by Jordan, followed by Barkley, Barkley was like what 5 or 6, and Stockton was like what 15 or something.
He was somewhere down.
I mean, it nailed it. Nailed it.
But see, this is the thing that I get into, because I say Houston really messed up their draft, because even though Olajuwon might have been ranked the highest, you didn't need him. You just had Ralph Sampson the year before.
Imagine if they drafted Jordan.
That's what I'm saying, because, and no disrespect to Louis Lloyd, who passed away recently, but Louis Lloyd and Robert Reed, and not Robert Reed, the Brady Bunch, Robert Reed. But you had these two as your two guards. You had Ralph Sampson, who was a preeminent All-American for 3 years in a row, and then you could have had Michael with him. That's why
it would have been amazing. It would have been amazing.
Then Portland was left, okay, we need a big man because we don't need Michael, because we drafted Clyde Drexler the year before. So that's why I said, people, think about it logically. Don't just use your heartstrings and say.
But they could have drafted Jordan too.
Bro, it's sports. Nobody's
they could have drafted Jordan too. They moved Drexler to the 3. They could have They could have drafted Jordan and moved Drexler to the 3. They could have had Jordan and Drexler.
I got that, but think about this though. You need a big man, right?
Right.
And Bowie was the second best big man coming out.
Oh yeah, but like you said, he had injury. He had major leg injuries going into that.
Hey, speaking of injuries, this is a great segue, because the other night, man, I happened to catch the Pistons and the New Orleans Pelicans, and the Pistons blew their doors off. But, man, I watched Zion Williamson play, and I was just so really disgusted, man, with the way he played. He had 30 points, 10 rebounds. Yeah. But John, the only time he gets excited is when the ball is in his hands. They're down 30-something. He's going to dunk it now. And he's just, dude, you're down 35 points. I mean, Willie Green, man, of Detroit, a good brother, good coach. I know he got to look at that. It's like, what are we doing here? It was just, bro, you got to do better than that, Zion.
Oh, yeah.
And I know, now he could be a guy that probably got Tendex numbers.
He does. He does. I would compare him to Barkley. Remember, Barkley was fat. And he eventually, all he got to do was study what Barkley did. Once Barkley slimmed down, he became an unbelievable player. He was great, even big. But once he slimmed down, he was phenomenal. That's all he needs to look at is study what he's Barkley. Like 30 years later, 20 years later, he's Barkley. Same thing, weight issues, unbelievable talent. But Barkley finally disciplined himself enough to lose the weight and just became this tremendous player. Where, like you say, Zion, his weight fluctuates, and he's not able to dominate. He should be dominating every night, not every other night or every third night.
But he was just as happy because he was getting his, and his team was getting blown off the door, man.
Yeah.
You know,
well, he could be happy just to be on the court because he's been off the court a lot.
He's got that money. Plus, you don't know how money's going to affect guys.
Yeah.
Some players, they get the money, they lose whatever it is they had. Some people are driven by the money. You know, he's gotten paid, he's gotten his money, and he's got his dunks, and I guess he's happy, right?
Well, but the one difference between him and Barkley is, think about this. When Barkley was at Auburn, nobody really knew who he was, but you remember he was a big dude. They were like, who's this big dude that's out here rebounding and running down the court with ease? And then Zion, we knew him since high school because he's an internet sensation. Yeah. So we already had a build-up for him, so he came in a different realm. And then the guy that helped Charles Barkley lose weight was Moses Malone.
Right.
Moses Malone just was honest with him, said, look, man, he said, the reason why you're not doing as well as you should be because you're too fat. And he said that hurt him, but he understood what Moses was trying to tell him. And he said, I'll work you out. And that's when he got slimmer, and then his game went to a different level. And people look at Barkley now as this jokester and all that. Barkley was a really, really good player back then.
Oh, phenomenal.
You kidding me? Yeah. Hey, but we were talking about great athletes earlier. At Auburn, and he played in the NBA. Chris, and now his last name?
Chris Morris.
Chris Morris, JD. Yeah. Oh, my gosh.
I'm laughing because I remember he was unbelievable. I remember when he was playing with the Nets, I was covering the Pistons, and they were terrible. The Nets were terrible. It was a game in Jersey, and it was a timeout, and they had a huddle. And I don't know who the coach was for the Nets. And he was talking to the team, and Morris was like looking up in the stands, and one of the fans, them New York, New Jersey fans are crazy. And he said, "Get in the game, Morris." It was like silence. You just heard him yell at him. Morris was like looking up in the stands. The rest of the team sitting down in the huddle. You had to laugh. Remember the guy at Washington? They used to sit behind the bench.
Oh yeah.
He was unbelievable. Robin Fickle.
Yeah.
Oh man, them guys of today. How you think LeBron would handle that, man? He'd have the guy kick him out of the arena. They couldn't handle that dude, man. He just recently had some kids yelling at him up here in Sacramento. He's watching his son playing the state championship game.
Hey guys, I'm sorry, Jay. I didn't mean to cut you off. We got about 8 minutes to go, and I wanted to talk about your upcoming documentary. I think you call it Wooten.
Well,
I don't know if you got a
I sent you an early sizzle reel. The title is now called "Get the Guys Together." It's about John Wooten, NFL legend, played with the Cleveland Browns, played with Paul Brown, great friends with Jim Brown. Very active in the 60s. He and Jim formed what was known as the Black Economic Union. It was a consortium of businesses in Cleveland and around the country. And later years, John became a player agent. One year had 7 first-round draft picks. Was the general manager in Philly when they hired Rich, hired in the league.
JD, we lost you a bit. When he was in Philly, who did he hire?
Ray Rhodes. He was instrumental in the Eagles hiring Ray Rhodes. Orchestrated with the Dallas Cowboys the Herschel Walker deal that everybody knows about. Yeah. He's the guy behind the scenes that actually made the trade. Jimmy Johnson and Jerry Jones take credit for it, but John Wooten actually made the trade and made enough deals to where they were able to draft Emmitt Smith. And in the last 20, 25 years, he was involved with the Fritz Powell Alliance when you started to see more black head coaches and general managers being hired. And we're telling his story as well as telling the history of the NFL. It's a fascinating story. We're working on it now. Hopefully soon going to get financing for it. And we're optimistic within the next year or so, we should have a finished product. I'm also writing a companion book on John Wooten, with the documentary about his life as well. So excited about that. Hey, JD, do you guys get into the meeting? Yeah, he orchestrated it. Thanks for mentioning that. He orchestrated the meeting. He got everybody together.
Oh, so there's your title. Get the guys together.
Yeah. Yeah. I'll send when I get the new sizzle reel, I'll send it to you. I think I sent you the first one, but I'll send it to you. And they talk about that. But Jim basically said, hey, John, get the guys together. And he got everybody there in Cleveland, that meeting. They met. And the rest is history. You know, if they hadn't had that meeting, who knows what would have happened with Muhammad Ali? Because you had all these players, these great black players. Bill Russell was there. You know, Jim was there. And Kareem was there. I think then he was at Lou Alcindor, I believe.
Bill Russell was there.
And yeah. And people forget how Ali was viewed at that time. You know, everybody at the end, everybody loved him. But he was not loved then.
Right.
And that gave him a lot of support, and he was able to go on with his career, you know, as a heavyweight champion. So it's a great story. Unfortunately, there's a lot of stories out there about people like John Wooten that don't get told, you know, and whether sports, business, what have you, education, law. And I just was fortunate enough to develop a relationship with him and finally convinced him that it's a story that needs to be told. It's a story that needs to be put in the history books. And, you know, we're gonna do the best job we can with that. And also, Mike Tomlin book, we're coming out with a paperback edition in the fall.
Yeah. Hey, but Mike, I know you got a question for JD. I do want to throw this in on the topic of get the guys together, because I think the athletes from that generation spoiled us to where we thought, you know what, why aren't you guys of today acting like those guys of yesterday? And I think some of the fellas, these brothers had to, because they were just on the front line. These guys now make so much freaking money that they think they're insulated, but you know, as Tiger Woods, you get pulled over, brother. You just another nigga driving under the influence. But can you kind of speak to that, JD?
Yeah, I mean, in fact, he tells us in the interviews that when he called everybody up, nobody questioned it. Well, who's going to take care of it? I don't know, man. I don't know if I can do this, dog. You know, it might affect my endorsements. And there was none of that. It was just, he called him up. Just calling up Bill Russell. Okay, I'll be there. You know, just imagine calling up Kareem. You know, Lou at that time, he was very young. He was by far the youngest of that group. I'll be there. You know, the respect they had for Ali and the respect they had for Jim Brown. And there was a different breed. That was the 60s, right? That was the civil rights era. So black folks in the 60s in general put a lot on the line, right? Just to make it through day to day. So they were a part of that. They were from that generation. And there'll probably never be another generation like that again. You know?
Absolutely. Right. Go ahead, Mike.
Well, I was going to just a little that, and then I got a question. Yeah, so you think about the one that does it now, he gets criticism. LeBron is probably the closest one to doing something like that. And what did other athletes say? Oh, man, what are you doing? And then we saw what happened to Kaepernick. What are you doing, man? What are you doing? You know, we don't need that. It's going to affect our bottom line. And then we're seeing all these people now gravitate towards Trump. Look what Mayweather just said. He's the best president I've ever had. Really?
I didn't hear that. I hadn't heard that.
That's what I'm saying. So that right there would have all those guys at that meeting turning over in their graves that aren't still alive now. But my question, though, I'm digress. My question is, since you've been a writer for a while, is there someone either that is not with us anymore that you want to write about, or is there someone still around that you would love to write about? I mean, I know that you felt compelled to write about Tomlin and Wooten right now, but is there somebody you said, man, if I somehow could get access to this person, I want to write about this person? Or if there's somebody back in the day that's not with us anymore, I wish I would have written about that person.
I'd actually like to write about one of us. I'd like to write about Ralph Wiley, who was, to me, a great influence when I was very young. And I met him when I was very young in the business. And he spawned, I mean, to me, today, Ralph Wiley would just crush it compared to what's out there today. a guy that put it all on the line. Great writer. He's the one that started writing books, doing speaking tours. He started doing all that stuff. People forget he was like the host on NFL Live on NBC. People forget about that. The host on the NBA post-game show. He did a lot of that stuff back then when people weren't even thinking about that. I mean, and he was always, for me, a motivator, somebody I could call, and just did. When I first realized that the Oakland Tribune had a black sports columnist, that I couldn't believe it. I didn't think that there were black sports columnists. So for me, just from a personal standpoint, and what he meant to the journalism profession for us and people that look like us, he's somebody I'd like to write about. I just popped into my head when you asked me the question. There are others, but he's somebody that just popped in, to me.
It's a lot of stories out there about our people and our community that haven't been told. But this is a great one. Tomlin, Mike, JD, where can everybody get it?
Oh, it's available on Amazon. Most of your bookstores you can get online. And like I said, we're going to come out with a paperback edition in the fall. It will have a couple new chapters. The Mike Tomlin saga has kind of changed a little bit the last couple of years. I don't know if I could have written that book that way now, to be honest with you. It's a different vibe out there. The story is still there. The vibe is different. And we're going to kind of get into a little bit of that. He is hated in Pittsburgh. I mean, I'm serious. He is hated in Pittsburgh. I mean, seriously.
When all this was going on about they're going to trade him, or what were your thoughts on that?
About Tomlin?
Yeah, at the end of the season, after they got beat in the playoffs.
Oh. Well,
did you ever think the organization was going to do something?
No. Well, the first thing people forget, I mean, in the media in Pittsburgh conveniently forgot, he signed a 3-year extension last year. They're not going to – the Steelers don't throw money away, period. They weren't going to sign him to a 3-year extension and fire him. That's from a financial standpoint. I really believe, and I'm going to kind of get into it a little bit in the new version of the book. I think it's something that came from the dad who passed away. I really do. And I think it's being carried on. I just think it's something that Dan Rooney decided when he hired Mike Tomlin. And that same year, he campaigned for Barack Obama. And Obama won. A few weeks later, the Steelers won the Super Bowl with Mike Tomlin. I just think there's this bond there. His son took over, Art Rooney, and now runs the team. I just think it's deeper than football. I don't know this for, no one has said this. But I've talked to enough people to get a feel that this is his relation. He'll coach the Steelers as long as he wants. The only black coach in history of sports that will ever have that type of situation. There'll never be another one to have it like that. There won't be.
Hey man, we got to come back, man, and before the playoff starts and everything. And we kind of break down the NBA playoffs.
Let me squeeze this in.
Yeah, go ahead, Mike. And then we got to go.
All right, so it's funny you mentioned that because I thought I was going to meet Tomlin finally. I had my colors on and everything when they were playing down in Vegas. So that's when I got that exclusive interview with Russell Wilson. And then I told Russell, I said, the 50th anniversary of when Joe Gilliam was the starter for the first 6 games. So it's ironic that Fields was started 6 games and then he was taken out of the lineup. But it was a different circumstance. Back then, it was a racial climate in Pittsburgh that was horrible, which is probably still the same. And then now you have a black coach and 2 black quarterbacks. So Russell was like really into the history of it, and we had a really good conversation about that. And so it's amazing how we're at
like the clown head.
That is a great story.
50 years.
Yeah.
That is a great story.
Hey, JD, when the playoff starts, man, right around that time, I'll reach out to you. For our great friend JD Harris, my frat brother Mike Roberson, I'm Rick Hampton. Peace, everybody. See you next time.
All right, now y'all take care. Good seeing you. All right.